every time I see the footage from the rallies, it actually makes you feel a little bit emotional. We were talking earlier about the level of unity that's there, and some of the scenes out of Sydney and Melbourne in particular on the weekend, the numbers of flags, these sort of different countries, different races, people of different religions, and probably people of different voting patterns. I don't think you get a more diverse and inclusive society at the moment than the Freedom Rallies. And for people in this building to call people who turn up extremists and anti-vaxxers is a disgrace.
All right, I'm really excited to finally speak to Alex Antic, who about 7 or 8 months ago, we actually published, the first time that you came out against vaccine passports, and people thought you were a bit, too forward thinking. And here we are. So thank you so much for standing up for us and what's going on. And thank you for coming on the show. And look, first of all, why did you start speaking out against vaccine passports before it even became a thing?
Yeah, well, look, thanks, Monica, and thanks for having me on. It's good to be here to be able to have a chance to chat about these things because, 6 or 7 months ago, as you were talking about, these things were conspiracy theories, right? So we were sort of looking down the barrel, I think, a little bit at some of this stuff. And I started, having my eyes opened by some of the stuff that was happening overseas. I was reading a lot of overseas news media, and there was a lot of discussion about this concept of vaccine passports, and it seemed to me to be kind of almost inevitable that we would pick it up here. So I thought it was a good idea, in this position, in this role, to start talking about it and start socialising the idea here and the dangers of it, and the dangers and the concepts of this two-tiered society that now has unfolded in front of us. And we're probably in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think we're probably seeing, people really starting to say, well, I know what you mean. And it really has started to do what we unfortunately were worried about all that time ago. And people like myself and George Christensen were on it and talking about it around this building, and still are, unfortunately. And we're going to continue to keep talking about it until we can get rid of it.
So what was the response when you first spoke out about it? And also now, do you get a lot of support, or do you get more not support?
I think at the time, because it was so far down the pipe, it just wasn't something that was on the radar of many. Many were. I think many were sort of forward thinking. There's a whole heap of others that I haven't mentioned there that were sort of across it. But I guess people just didn't know where things were going to evolve to, and politics didn't. But ultimately, I think you've got to be cognizant of where things head, from the get-go. And that's one of my real bugbears about the sort of things we can do at Commonwealth level, because the Commonwealth government controls that data, and I think it's being used to segregate people. I think it's being used to sort of create that two-tiered society. And I don't want to see that data being used against people in that format, because that's exactly what's happened now. People, I'm hearing the stories, you're hearing the stories about people not being able to go to their doctor. Real essential services like that. At first, the main thought was, not getting on airliners and that sort of thing. But this is becoming serious, and that's why we've sort of picked up this week and made the noise that we've made, because it's got to stop.
So yeah, what is happening in Parliament right now? Just try to imagine that the audience know nothing about what you have done. One Nation, Craig Kelly, George Christensen. Yep. There's a few other MPs as well. From what I understand, you've basically said you're not voting for anything until the vaccine mandates stop. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, that's a good summary. So in essence, the fuse was really lit by Senator Gerard Rennick from Queensland, who wrote to the Prime Minister almost a month ago and said that, and because of the stories that he'd been hearing about, people being coerced and all that sort of stuff, he said, we've got to do something about it, and he's not voting with the government until such time as we do. And I followed him. I followed his lead. I think, he's absolutely right. The issue is that the states control most of this. So it is difficult. It is harder for the federal government to really have a sweeping effect the nature of the federation means, and the powers that have been given to the states on health have been used in these emergency management acts so that the states can create public health directions, and that's what's being used to mandate and segregate. So, but the federal government does have levers to pull, like I described, controlling the data. I mean, I think if people are being discriminated against, then there are funding options that can be taken away. I mean, I think we can be taking some punitive action that way. Doctors shouldn't be rejecting people because of their vaccination status, those sorts of things. But of course, the big one from where I sat was, and my hope was that the government would introduce some sort of anti-discrimination laws. We're in the middle of doing that with the religious discrimination laws at the moment. But of course, one of the things that really sticks out is this sort of vaccine discrimination. I mean, it's not a very elegant term, but it's, for want of a better way of putting it, COVID discrimination. So that's people being, effectively mandated for shots, but also being terminated from their employment, from being rejected access to businesses and services. And that was what the One Nation bill did. Now, it was a bill that sort of had, a few little issues on the way through, which could have been smoothed out. But there were a group of us that said, well, that will do the trick. And we crossed the floor with One Nation and voted for it. So 5 coalition senators crossed the floor to vote with One Nation in addition to the 2. So there were 7 of us, not enough to get it done. There were 44 who voted against. But that's sort of, that's not unexpected. But look, I feel really strongly about this. I'll let you know a little secret, Monica. I'm not an overly emotional person, but I have to say, every time I see the footage from the rallies, it actually makes you feel a little bit emotional. We were talking earlier about the level of unity that's there, and some of the scenes out of Sydney and Melbourne in particular on the weekend, the numbers of flags, these sort of different countries, different races, people of different religions, and I think probably people of different voting patterns. I don't think you get a more diverse and inclusive society at the moment than the freedom rallies. And for people in this building to call people who turn up extremists and anti-vaxxers is a disgrace. They're Aussies and they're as worried about these issues as you and I. So we've all got to do our bit. In my case, I think I've got a bit of a platform here, and I'm preparing and entitled in the middle to use it for what I think needs to be done.
Now, thank you so much for that. But what I find very confusing is that I understand that the states can do their own thing when it comes to the Public Health Act and things like that. But Scott Morrison, I saw a video of him about a week and a half ago, and he said the mandates need to end. The government needs to get out of people's lives and let them live their lives. We've got the vaccination rates that we want. But then it really does nothing. Like, how does that happen when the Prime Minister is saying that's enough and the states are saying, no, we're going to keep doing it? How does that happen?
Yeah. Well, it's a really good, I think it's interesting, and people will look at this, historians will look at this period, I think, back in time and look at it and say, this really shows what we've known, but it hasn't really come into the fore for probably a century, that the states have a lot of power. The states have a lot of power under the federation. And it was designed that way, and generally speaking, that's a good thing. In this case, though, they have powers over healthcare that the Commonwealth really only has limited angles to look at. So, look, the Prime Minister, I mean, that is the line of the government. My personal position is, though, that there are more things that we can do. There are things that we can do, for starters, and we should be doing. That's what I'm pressing for. But they're not easy and obvious solutions. I mean, people find this hard to believe. Their funding, their data. I think I would have liked to have seen an anti-discrimination bill, but that didn't happen. But there is no real easy legislative lever to pull to sort of just say the states can't do what they're doing anymore, because it's really a matter of the Constitution. So it's tricky, but my view is there are things we can do and should be doing.
I mean, informed consent is also part of the Constitution, but that's not working. And so, but also, I was going to say that with the Belt and Road Initiative in Victoria, Scott Morrison found a way to actually stop that from the Commonwealth, which was really great, by the way, something I really supported him for. So what if, like, my opinion as just a citizen, I think to myself, as the Prime Minister, he could be having that speech on mainstream media every day saying it needs to stop, it needs to stop, it needs to stop. Surely if he became like a squeaky wheel, that could help.
Yeah, I think so. And look, I think increasingly you might see that. I think, one of the things that I think really is of interest here is that, we were talking about it before, and not that this is the case in the Prime Minister's case, but I think politics as a broad concept hasn't quite understood this movement yet. I think the Prime Minister's office do, but I don't know that the rank and file of politics, and I'm talking about politics all the way from federal politics down to local government, although I did see there was a local government in Queensland, I think the Yeppoon local government, that banned vaccine mandates or any suggestion of them around their council. So it's getting to some places. But I don't think politics has understood what we're talking about at the moment. It's the power of fear. I think the issue of fear has been so weaponized in this COVID experience that it's sort of, we've seen things in this country that I don't think any of us ever thought we were going to see. The scenes out of Melbourne, you've been talking about the scenes everywhere, even some scenes yesterday in Sydney that were pretty alarming of, police pushing people around and that sort of thing. I mean, I wasn't there. Everything's got to be seen from the ground to know what really happened, but they're ugly scenes, whichever way you look at it. And it doesn't look like Australia at the moment. So look, I think there are things the Commonwealth government can and should do. And as I said, I mean, as it stands at the moment, my position hasn't changed. I won't be giving my vote to the government of which I'm a member, neither will Gerard, until we have given people greater protection. The best protection we can give from Commonwealth level.
Yeah, well, how does what you and Jared Rennick and a few others are doing, Abetz, I think Eric Abetz, what you're doing by withholding your vote, how does that affect the government in terms of numbers and getting things passed? Are you able to actually stop anything that you want now?
Well, not quite. I mean, the numbers are pretty tight in the Senate. So it depends on the bill, it depends on whether it's supported by the Greens and Labor. So, I mean, legislation's been passing, but there are things that won't, because my view is that this is the preeminent issue, this one we're talking about now, and this needs the utmost attention. So there are a few, I think Gerard and I are the only two that have gone down this path, but there are a group, and it is a growing group, I might say, of people, of MPs that are very uncomfortable about this. One of the things that's really become obvious, and I get this from state parliaments as much as federal parliaments, is the number of MPs who feel the same way but are worried about speaking out about it because of the backlash that you get from some sides of politics, some sides of the media, being labelled an anti-vaxxer and being labelled a COVID denialist and whatever names they can throw at you. They don't really bother me. I've said a couple of times I quite enjoy the name calling because it's something else, something new, puts a bit of colour into the world, but doesn't bother me. But there are some who really don't like it, and they just haven't plucked up the courage. But I'll say this: increasingly in the next few weeks, I think we're going to see more and more of them pop their head up, and it's largely through the work that people have been doing on the streets, peaceful protests, all in the right spirit, all pulling for the same cause, which is a great country that we call home.
Yeah. I think you nailed it on the head before. It's so diverse now, the movement. And I think you're right. I don't think Parliament or the mainstream media really understand the movement. And it's all a bit shocking for them to see the growth over the last 3 weeks. And that is really 100% because of the vaccine coercion and mandates. That's what it is. That is what has brought people together. So,
I think it is. I mean, everybody has a story. Everybody knows somebody who has been a teacher for 30 years and is now out on their ear because of their choices they're making about their own healthcare. I mean, this is almost unbelievable 2 years ago or a year ago even, to think that people, and particularly when you put the science in perspective. I mean, I've been saying this a bit. We keep getting told across the political spectrum to trust the science. We hear that a lot, except when it comes to this issue. The science tells us that people still transmit the virus when they're vaccinated. And yet people are being removed from jobs and businesses and all this sort of stuff. When do we stop trusting the science? The science is very clear on this stuff. And the same, I've been using slogans. I was saying yesterday that, I remember 2 years ago, we were all in this together, and I must have missed it because there must have been a little rider at the bottom of that which said, as long as you do what you're told, because, we're not in it together. There are people that have said they don't want to be vaccinated. They don't want to be pushed around. They don't want to be told what to do. So they're not in it together. That's not what we wanted. We didn't want this two-tier society, and we have to do what we can to try and fix it.
Well, I speak on behalf of everyone watching. Thank you for fighting the good fight, and we'll be watching and supporting you as much as possible. Is there a lasting message you want to give to the audience before you leave?
Yeah, well, I did, Monica. Look, and thanks for having me on. This is important times in our country, I think, and I just wanted to give people hope that there is a growing number of voices, I think, here in Canberra, and I think across the state parliaments as well. But certainly here, the numbers are growing. They've grown this week. The number of people that are very, very unhappy about things that are happening and want to try and lend their voice to the whole charge as well. Look, it has been pretty amazing to watch the movement growing, to see, as we said earlier, the diversity and the number of different, races, colours, creeds, religions, and probably people of different voting habits as well out on the street. So it's been a pretty amazing time. I just want to say to people, hang in there. I think the message is getting out. There is no way that the numbers of people on the streets can be hidden forever. And I think, we've seen it reported in increasing frequency in the mainstream media as well. So it's really, really important. And I just want to give people some hope that there are people here in Canberra and all around the state parliaments that are trying to get this message across. So hang in there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we will be supporting you for sure. And keep up the hard work, because we need help from inside that building. So thank you so much.
That's my pleasure. And thanks for having me.